Pleasure to be here talking to you folks. Like you said, yeah, I'll talk for about 45 minutes or so, and then we can open it up to questions. So thank you for joining me, specifically to hear me talk about from sexual madness to sexual mindfulness. And I'm going to start first with looking at mindfulness, and then we're going to back up some and look at madness and the sexual stories we tell ourselves, and then we'll circle it back to mindfulness. Everything in our lives has the potential to wake us up or to put us to sleep. Allowing it to awaken us is up to us. I love this quote. This is Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist nun here in the United States, and I think just a fantastic mindfulness, meditation, and compassion teacher. And she really speaks from the heart and practices what she preaches. And I think this quote really just poignantly points to how we move through the world on automatic pilot in a lot of ways, and we're kind of asleep, and we actually do have a choice to wake up. We just need to realize that and then get the skills of knowing how to do it. So very briefly, in the interest of time, I'm just going to have any folks that are following along here, if you just get in a comfortable position and close your eyes for a few moments. We're going to do a brief just mindfulness exercise. So close your eyes and get comfortable and take a few deep breaths. Those type of breaths where you fill up your belly, up to your chest, all the way up to your throat with air, and then a full exhale all the way out. And just check in. What's it feel like to be in your body in this moment right now? And direct your attention to your sense of hearing. What do you notice? Certainly have the sound of my voice. You might hear the air conditioner in the background where I am. Perhaps you can hear street sounds, somebody moving around near you. Just observe. What do you notice? And if you're distracted, just acknowledge that distraction. Don't judge it. And choose to bring your focus back to your sense of hearing. Now, shift your focus to your sense of feeling and touch. What, do you feel the clothes on your body, the chair, the seat under you, the hair on the back of your neck? Again, just observe it. There's no value judgment that needs to be there. It's just observation. And what about any feelings inside of you? What sensations do you notice inside your body? Perhaps visceral sensations inside your chest or your solar plexus or your belly. Again, just observe. Now shift your focus to your sense of smell. Do you notice anything around you? I can smell the flowers next to me a little bit. See what you observe. Again, without judgment, just notice it. Now choose your focus and choose to focus on your sense of taste. Do you notice anything with your taste buds? Any coffee or tea or lunch you just had, or again, just observe. And if you're distracted, choose to bring your focus back to your sense of taste. And finally, even though your eyes are closed, shift your focus to your sense of sight and just see. Do you notice, you might notice colors or patterns even with your eyes closed. And just observe that. We'll take a few more deep breaths. And then open your eyes when you're ready. Hopefully you feel calmer, more grounded, more in the moment, more in touch with yourself and your surroundings. I'm always surprised when I do that, and then I open my eyes and I notice all of the vibrant colors around me that I hadn't noticed before. Yeah, that's a lot of beauty in mindfulness and what's available there. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is present moment awareness without judgment, which is what I just guided you through. Like even noticing when you're distracted by something in the past, or rehashing something in the past, or worried about something in the future, recognizing that and choosing to bring your focus back to the present and wherever you're choosing to concentrate in that moment, and then not judging what you're noticing in the now. And I had you do that with your 5 senses. And why would we want to do this? It's because we're so often on automatic pilot moving through this world, and that we are literally missing out on the juiciness in this present moment. The present moment is where we genuinely connect with other people. It's where we really get to know ourselves. It's where we have the potential for any personal growth that we're looking for. It has to happen in the present moment. And we have to be able to cultivate the skill of presence to be able to even have any chance for personal growth and moving forward. And what really makes us happiest in life. Most of us want some sort of depth of intimacy with others, of that emotional rawness with others, and that safety. And cultivating mindfulness is a beautiful path there. And so I really like to use the analogy of a river. And so imagine that you're walking along the shore. It's say you're back on the East Coast and it's fall, and the leaves are beautiful and they're red and they're yellow, and it's just gorgeous, and you are so in the moment and you're breathing the crisp fresh air and you're walking along this raging river, and all of a sudden you remember an email you got that morning from your boss, and you're so afraid that you're in trouble, and you just feel everything inside of you tighten up and your thoughts start racing. It's as if you're not in the most beautiful environment. And it's like in that moment, instead of being present and enjoying and appreciative, it's like you've fallen into the river, and this raging river has just swept you away, and you have no choice. And so mindfulness is learning how to step back on the shore and observe that raging river of thoughts, emotions, bodily sensations that just sweep us away. And that don't give us access to the present moment. And so stepping back on the shore gives us access to the present moment. But I think it's important. You're not out of the river though, because cultivating mindfulness skills is still feeling everything you're feeling. You don't stop feeling anxiety or angst or worry or shame. It's just you get to have a choice about it now. So I like to say it's like you're standing on the edge of the river. Your feet are still feeling the swirl of all of the chaos of your thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations, but you are not swept away by it. You observe it going by, you feel it, you're fully present with it. But because you are staying present in the moment and not swept away, now you can make a different choice about it. I think that is the epitome of empowerment, of being able to make choices where we didn't have access to choices before or didn't even know it was possible. Because otherwise we just have what, folks in the meditation world called a monkey mind. It's just chattering and going off. And these, if you've ever watched, these are capuchin monkeys. I took this picture at the San Diego Zoo. Those guys are just like, and like everywhere running around. That's what our brains are like. And so we learn how to train them, and train them in a way that really serves our happiness and our sex lives and our relationships. So what goes hand in hand with mindfulness is compassion. And I call compassion empathy and action. So what compassion is you have to have the mindfulness to recognize that someone else is suffering or hurting in some way, or that you are. That's the first step. The second step is then that you have the empathy about it, that you actually care about it. Step 3 is that you want to do something about it. You want to help alleviate that pain in someone else or in yourself. And 4 is then that you take action in some way. And, I went through a great 8-week Cultivating Compassion course several years ago. And even sometimes that action part of compassion is just sitting, doing a meditation around compassion and thinking about a friend who's suffering and taking in their suffering and willing to take it in and then transmuting it to compassion for yourself and that person and sending that loving energy. And I know that doesn't sound like you're actually doing anything, but what that trains you to do is to be able to sit with the suffering of others and not have to fix it or not have to run from it, or not have to, necessarily make it better, but just to be able to be present. And frankly, when someone else is suffering, that's one of that number one step is the best thing we can do. So why is it important that mindfulness and compassion go hand in hand? Because otherwise, if you just have mindfulness without compassion, you have a very mindful sniper, for example, somebody who is so focused and concentrated in the moment on what they're doing, and they're not judging what they're doing, but it's devoid of compassion and the impact on what they're doing. So those two really need to go hand in hand. And it's really important to balance compassion with self-compassion. I also just love cats and try to work that into all of my slides. But this video actually is relevant because Pema Chodron, who I referenced before, talks about the balance of compassion and self-compassion is, ideally we like to get to the point that we can just open our front door and let the whole world in. Everybody can come in with their struggles and their issues, and we can stay comfortable and grounded and kind and giving to them. But that's not always good self-compassion for us, because it could be somebody who's very toxic for you and unhealthy for you. Somebody that just doesn't bring out the best in you, or, a father that didn't treat you well growing up, and somebody who's just not good for you. And so that is the balance of how far do we open the door. It's not just, especially women in our society, we're really taught that we're supposed to just, be kind to everybody and give everyone else their needs. But we need to balance that with self-compassion, taking care of ourselves. We open the door as much as we can in kindness to others, but always balancing it with kindness and care for ourselves. Do a little time check here. Okay. So what this all is about is between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So that's and I'm about to teach you a tool for mindfulness, because that's the biggest thing we want. We want to have a second at least that when something triggers us into an old pattern, we get to pause, that we can create space there. Because in that space, then we can do something different. Then instead of reacting, we actually get to respond. And over time, we can build up that space so it's longer and longer, and then we can have healthier choices for ourselves. So this is the main tool I love to use in mindfulness. It's the triangle of awareness. And it's the idea that in any moment that you are feeling triggered in some way, which means that you want to lash out at somebody, you want to shut down and retreat, you want to numb yourself because something feels too uncomfortable to be with. So you want to, smoke pot or go do a shot, or you're in an uncomfortable conversation with your partner or something's awkward and you just walk away and pick up your phone and then you scroll Instagram for the next hour. all of those things are things that we do to run, numb, distract, and block from things that don't feel good. And those are all programmed patterns into us. And so this is the basic tool I teach, the triangle of awareness, and to realize that in any moment, we have thoughts going on, meanings, interpretations, we have emotions that are going on, and then we have bodily sensations of where we feel this inside of us. And I'm going to break apart each piece of those. So by thoughts, what are thoughts in any moment? They're just random thoughts that just trigger in our brain that we have no control over. There are interpretations of a situation, the meaning that it has, and often in our adult relationships, we have interpretations and meanings of things that our partners say that are totally based on interpretations and meanings we learned from childhood, from our parents, and from the patterns we learned there. Memories that we have, and just sort of, mental events going on. So one of the biggest things that I teach folks at the top of the triangle, thoughts, that your thoughts are not facts. And this is a basic, psychology teaching to folks. But I find that people, even when they know it, it's still so hard to not think that your thoughts and your interpretations or something are reality. And I like to use a visual like this, that we would totally swear that those two dogs are totally different colors because one's yellow and one's clearly blue. But when you pull them out of the context, you see that they are exactly the same color. And I have to say, I've looked at this a bunch of times. That still blows my mind. That's crazy. But what a good example that, boy, would we be so sure of that. And like 100% sure that that would be a factual statement about a yellow and blue dog. And to realize how much our interpretations are absolutely shaped by the context. And the context is shaped by, in this case, the environment. But our context of interpretation, the lens we look through the world, is based through our genetics and our personality and how we were raised and our sociocultural upbringing and what we learned about sex and relationships and what gender roles we were taught, and what experiences we've had. All of that shapes the lens of how we view through the world and interpret things. And there's, 6-7 billion people in the world, and everybody has their own lens. So that was the thoughts, the interpretations, the top part of the triangle. The next part is your emotions. And I actually like to give folks this detailed list of, and this is focusing on negative emotions, or what we call negative emotions. And I had a client years ago. He was a young man. He was from the military, and he had been overseas in service. And he was with his girlfriend, and he was really upset with her about something. And I said, well, what emotions are coming up for you? And he said, well, I'm angry. I'm like, what else? Well, I'm frustrated. What else? I'm irritated. I'm like, okay, that's the same constellation of emotions there. Anything else under the surface, do you think? And he goes, nope, that's it. I pulled out this sheet. He started going through it, and it was like his whole energy changed. And he like dropped into his body, and he started circling them. And he goes, oh, I'm embarrassed. I'm humiliated. And he started tearing up when he said that. He's like, I'm sad. I'm disappointed. I feel a little anxious about it. And he's just like, his whole demeanor changed. And you could tell he dropped into the body. He dropped into the present moment of what was very real for him in the moment and in those emotions. And once we got to that, and that level of vulnerability and authenticity, and then his girlfriend heard that, then she was like, oh my gosh, of course I don't want you to feel any of those things. And that beautiful sharing and vulnerability moment allowed them to come back together, and then we could work through their concern. Okay, so we had thoughts and the top part of the triangle, then we have the emotions, and now what about the bodily sensations? And I think this is a piece that's most missing in American society, because we have so much happening inside of us at any time, from feeling a constriction in your throat to feeling your pounding heart to getting warm all over and tense muscles to anxiety and that prickly feeling in your chest, to our solar plexus has all sorts of weird feelings, butterflies and stuff, to our gut and like that dropping feeling when you get bad news, overall sadness, jealousy can feel like a dropping, like a nausea feeling. All of that feels terrible, frankly. And I think a lot of the patterns that we have are to avoid those feelings, because we learned at a young age that stuff feels shitty and we don't want to be with it. But building the skill to be able to sit with it and mindfully sit with it and be kind to yourself in it, that is at the heart of a lot of our personal growth and breaking our patterns. So this is a really cool visual that I use in some of my talks. And so this is out of some folks, researchers in Scandinavian country. I forget which one. And so this is an actual body scan, because I thought that at first, but they had a whole bunch of folks in their study report where they feel in their body various emotions. And what they found is that there was so much consistency across all of these people where their emotions showed up in their bodies. And so the more red and yellow something is, that's like greater sensation. And so I think, look at the bottom row and you see love, and just like that is an all over like positive warmth feeling. Now you look at depression next to it, and it's the exact opposite. It's like your body is numb, your body is shutting down. And then, a few down is shame. And that's one I talk about a lot, because sexual shame is a real heavy topic. And sexual shame, folks certainly feel it in their face because their faces can get red. But shame, we feel here and down in our solar plexus, and it is such a horrible feeling. We just want to bury our heads in the sand. So I teach all of this like with the triangle in the 3 steps, the 3 A's. Awareness, which is what I just walked you through, of those 3 areas and shining a bright light on it. Accepting it, right? Because that's the second part of mindfulness. It's awareness in the moment without judgment. And so it's accepting what's there without judging yourself. And I really say having compassion for yourself. It is not easy to go through a process like the triangle and stay present with something that's so uncomfortable that you've been avoiding for maybe 20 years. So to have kindness for yourself and have compassion, like that's not an easy thing to do. Be proud of yourself that you're willing to do it. And then some kind of action. And by action, I mean doing something different than whatever you've been programmed to do. And so if you usually lash out at somebody, it's being quiet in the moment. If you usually shut down in that moment, then it's speaking up and maybe saying, hey, I noticed I'm really struggling in this moment right now. Give me a moment, and then I'll come back to you and speak. Or if you usually just, numb yourself and distract and, like I said, get on social media or play video games or something, your action could be just to journal on this and stay present with those emotions for a little bit longer. You're just creating space. You're creating space that wasn't there before for you to actually reflect on what's coming up for you and what's going on. And then from there is where it will slowly start to snowball, and that you'll start to make healthier choices in those moments. But what if I don't want to accept it? And I hear this because people are like, I don't like these things that are showing up about me. I don't like these thoughts. I don't like these emotions. I don't like what this says about me. And so I really love this quote by Sherry Huber. Rejection does not lead to compassion. Compassion leads to compassion. Rejection leads to rejection. If you see something you don't like about the way you are and you beat yourself up for it, pretty soon you'll have trained yourself to stop looking. That is so poignant. Sherry Huber, she's another Buddhist teacher. We think that if we need to beat ourselves up or reject part of ourselves, or that means we condone them or they're going to take over. But that's not how we work. We need to love it and shine a light on it and accept all of us and all of our beauty and messiness. And then that's the space that we can actually move forward and grow and change from that loving place of acceptance. And I know it's counterintuitive, but it's so profound, and it's definitely a human truth. So a real quick client example about putting the triangle into action. I had worked with some clients years ago, and they were a couple in their 50s. A married couple, together a long time, 2 teenage boys, really loved each other and like best friends. But he had cheated on her for a while, and she had found out, and she was devastated by it. But they wanted to stay together, and so they were working through how to do that. And so I had a private session with her, and we walked through the triangle. And so because I jotted this down, so I wanted to make sure I got this accurate. So, her thoughts were, he's not attracted to me. My body's getting older. We shouldn't talk about these topics. Why should I let him back in? And her emotions were fear and distrust and hurt and embarrassment, humiliations, insecurities about herself. And if you notice on the triangle, I have the arrows are there. All of this is like circling, like it can all circle in like 2 seconds, all of these things and bouncing off each other. And then her sensations, she noticed she had a constriction in her throat, which literally felt like she wasn't speaking her truth. And then she felt sickness and nausea in her stomach. And so just the process of getting this detailed and staying present with this level of discomfort and me facilitating it for her gave her new insights. Just that process itself was half the battle of being able to stay with it. And the new insight she got is that she realized she needed to forgive herself because she blamed herself for this. And so that's in the place we started. And so by working through all of that, the process then gave her skills and strengths to start to have regular check-ins with her husband about these topics. And for him to be able to share with transparency any contact he was having with the opposite sex. She started to develop trust and faith again. Through practice, doing some mindfulness practices, she was learning to trust her intuition again, because that was part of why she blamed herself. Like, how didn't I know? And they hadn't had sex in a long time, so then she was blaming herself. So the whole bit of it. And she was able to gain trust and self-respect back again through the triangle process and doing journaling around it. And then they were able to slowly start moving back to having some sensual activities together. Yeah, and I tell folks too, even if you don't know how to start a conversation, but you know you're stuck, pull out the triangle and just say, I'm stuck. I don't know where to go. I don't want to do what we normally do here. I want to do something different. I'm not even sure what that is, but I'm just going to pull the triangle out. And here are the thoughts that are going on for me. I'm feeling some things here and prickly here. And I think I'm feeling sad, and I think I'm feeling disappointed. And now I'm worried what you're going to think about me. Here, you do the triangle. What's going on for you? And I call that just calling out what is. And it's a really beautiful tool for doing that. Okay. I'm going to watch our time here. Okay, we're good. So the 4 different ways that I apply mindfulness specifically. And it is, my version of it is very much a applied mindfulness. So first, I think a lot of people, when people think mindful sex or sexual mindfulness, it's in the moment sexual presence for connection and pleasure and joy. So that's when you're actually in a sexual encounter. How do you attune to your pleasure? How do you attune to the emotions of your partner? How do you recognize when you're distracted and choose to bring yourself back in the moment so you can just really surrender and get lost in the moment. So that is absolutely one way that mindfulness skills can help around sex and intimacy. Now, the second one, mindfully reflecting on childhood and teen messages and stories, including gender roles. This is one that I focus on a lot as a sociologist. What did you learn growing up? What did you learn were appropriate gender roles, and how is that impacting your sex and relationship, and how does that undermine you and the type of intimacy you're looking for? What other stories did you inherit from society? And this is a lot of my first book here that was just published this week, From Madness to Mindfulness, Reinventing Sex for Women. That's the beginning part of the book, is looking at that for women and unpacking all of that mindfulness and all those messages we've been taught. So a third way that I apply mindfulness is applying it to specific patterns and reactions in a relationship. So like the triangle that I taught you, that is such a great tool, that you're in a relationship with somebody, you're like, I keep undermining it. I keep shutting down in these conversations or lashing out, or I don't know how to have a responsible conversation about our waning sex life. And that's applying mindfulness in your current relationship and doing it with your partner is a really powerful tool. And then the last one is specifically applying mindfulness to concerns around low sexual desire. There's some fantastic research. Lori Brotto out of Vancouver is doing fantastic research around that, and has been for a long time. Performance concerns, body image concerns, and also consent. And that's work I do at college campuses around the country, teaching applied mindfulness and compassion skills around sexual consent and gender roles, and teaching college students kind of how to reinvent their approach to all of those things. So, okay. So the second part of this, and I'll just do this for the next 15 minutes or so, is looking at what is a story. So this is where I'm going to take this is the sexual stories that we've been taught and inherited, and what do we do about that? So I want to start with the place, though, of, what is a story? And a story is basically an event or a happening that's being told in a way that is emotionally compelling to the listener, and that they're learning something from it. And so throughout history, human history, stories have been a vital part of passing on traditions. This is how societies pass on their values, their social norms, what matters to them, their mores. In history, before we had writing, and certainly before we had print and publications that way, and the printing press, it was just oral tradition. So this is a huge part of what it is to be a human around stories. And why do we remember stories? So our brain seems to be trained to remember stories. We're wired that they stick with us. And if you do much public speaking, they've probably told you, well, you could throw stats at people, but they won't really remember that. You throw a story at somebody, a meaningful, powerful story, that's what they're going to go home and remember. So there seems to be the way our brain is trained. And hold on, I wanted to reference a research study about this. And I wanted to make sure I get it right. So some of the research says, we are innately social creatures as humans. We literally need each other for surviving and thriving. And if you look like a human baby can't live on its own for years, unlike, babies of other animals. So we literally need other humans to take care of us for us to even have a chance for existence in this world. And then as adults, what makes us most thrive and happiest is our connections, our good connections to other human beings. So we are innately social creatures. For this to work well, we need to be able to trust each other and to be trusted. And so we need to experience kindness and empathy so that we can work together. And what some researchers found is that oxytocin is produced when we are trusted or when we show a kindness to others. And then that motivates cooperation. And what some researchers found is that character-driven stories, so when you're listening to a story about a character who, you care about them, they're struggling with something that they overcome, you can feel the emotions, you're learning something from it, that actually releases oxytocin in our brains. And so, so that's what these researchers are arguing. The reason that good storytelling sticks with us and is meaningful to us is because it hits us at a core level of the oxytocin and the bonding that we have with other human beings. And that's innately wired into us. And so that sticks with us. So we all have then lots of sexual stories that have been told to us from society, from our families, through religion, church, politics, our peers, our sex education programs, to our own personal experiences. And basically, because we're not aware of this growing up, that this is all being taught to us, we all think this is what's normal and natural, and we don't realize this is an actual story that others are telling us, that they then become our sexual and intimacy stories that we carry into adulthood. And so there are so many factors that shape our sexual stories. And this is what I call like the madness, from sexual madness to sexual mindfulness. Like, this is the madness that our sexual stories that we learn through trauma and sexual assault, through embarrassing experiences, through negative words, through sometimes viewing pornography before we're ready for it and can, make sense of it. Media images, especially women's bodies plastered everywhere in the perfect image. To maybe the silence in your household around sex, that it was never talked about. And then therefore you think it's this horrible thing, but then you're having sexual desire. What does that make you? So all the shame you have around that. Women giving birth, the pregnancy process and the birth process, that can do all sorts to change bodies and lots of non-consensual medical happenings in hospitals. Our genetics and our personality shape all of this. Our menstrual cycles, our hormones, menopause, your experiences around orgasms, sex education you received, your relationships experiences, STIs, PMS. all of these things and so much more shape our sexual experiences. And our interpretation of all of that is often through the lens of what we've been taught. And where I think mindfulness is so empowering is that when we could stop and stay present with these stories and realize, what are these thoughts? What are these emotions? What are the bodily sensations? Where did I learn all of these things? That's where then you can actually step back and realize, wait, maybe I can rewrite my story. So all of that madness we've inherited from society and from others, and others kind of, imposing their BS on us, that then becomes our stories. I think that we can use this perspective all to our advantage. So first of all, by identifying our patterns and beliefs as a story, we can, one, tap into empathy and compassion for ourselves. So like I said, that's what the researchers found. When we read a story or hear a story, it evokes empathy in us and compassion in us for those people. We can take that towards ourselves, or at least I theorize that we can. I don't see why not. And it's been working in the workshops I've been doing around this for folks to realize, like, you get in touch with your own story, you can feel moved by your own story and have compassion for yourself. And that is a foundation for being able to do something different. And then we can also realize that if it's our story, that we're the ones that wrote it, even though it was stuff imposed from us on the outside, we didn't have a choice about that. It came in at us. That we actually then have the choice to change it, and we can actually start to rewrite our own stories. So how do we do that? And so this is some stuff I do in workshops with folks, and obviously I can't get interaction from you, but if you have any questions at the end around it, or you can always write to me about it. So I instruct folks first to look at, why would you want to rewrite your sexual story? So folks feel engaged in this process. Like, what's the benefit to even trying to rewrite your story? Because folks need to realize you absolutely have the right to rewrite your story, and that you can learn the skills to do it. And while it may feel overwhelming and daunting, all you have to do is just start taking one step at a time and getting clear on what's your motivation to that. Why would you want to do that? And then you can look at what happens if you stay stuck in your current story. Imagine the rest of your life and nothing changes. What would be lost for you? What potential would be lost there? What would you never experience that you want to? What growth would you never have? And then also asking, what's possible if you do rewrite parts of your story? So those are all kind of 4 questions that are kind of getting at the same question, but hitting at it at different angles. Because I want folks to really feel motivated in rewriting their sexual story and knowing that it's worth the discomfort of sitting with their present stories and shining a bright light on them, and then moving through that. So, what is your story then? And if any folks want to, take this home as an exercise, I walk folks through, at least like a 15-minute exercise. And the fact is, this could be hours. I did this workshop recently, and there was an older gentleman there who I think is like 72. And, I gave him like 10 to 15 minutes to write things down. And we had someone else in the audience that was only 22. And so she was like, and she was done pretty quick. And a 17-year-old or 72-year-old gentleman was like, oh my gosh, she goes, I've barely scratched the surface. Like, where do I even start with this? This is an ongoing process of exploring your sexual story. And you could start it anywhere. I'd start with places that are probably easier or lighter for you. If you definitely have some heavier traumas in there, you might want to go through this process with a trusted friend or a counselor, a therapist, or a coach. Mindfulness and meditation, like I said, it always needs to be balanced with self-compassion. You open the door as much as you can in a way that you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, but not too much. So make sure you have support around you. If you feel like there's there's just a lot of heaviness here that you don't think you'll process on your own. But otherwise, like, what is your story? So what did you learn growing up? When did you first hear about sex? What did you see with your parents? What were your early sexual experiences and conversations, religious beliefs, masturbation? What did you learn in school? What media images do you remember? What things did you read? What conversations did you have with siblings or peers? And then what have you experienced? Pleasure, pain, desire, attraction, lack of attraction, fears, STIs, pregnancy, hormonal changes, public shaming, judgment, rejection, embarrassment. I mean, the list can just go on. And I suggest that folks, when they write this, that they actually, and first of all, don't type it. Like, writing this down really matters. Writing, especially difficult things, is with our hands versus typing. It's a cathartic experience. And it seems to some researchers found that it accesses a different part of our brain that helps us work through emotions and helps us, move through to the other side. So please, I know we're used to typing things and all, but please, I really suggest that you do this on a piece of paper in a journal. You could throw it out, you could burn it, you could do whatever you want afterwards. And then do it double spaced, because then after, you spend at least 15 minutes doing that, then you can come back and be like, okay, what parts are empowering? And don't forget, you can have empowering parts of your story. You could have that really great one semester with a sex ed teacher that's the one that told you that you actually have a clitoris and normalized female pleasure. Like, I certainly didn't have that growing up in Pennsylvania. Or, just a good friend that you could turn to when a difficult thing happened to you, and how much that helped you process in a healthy way that, consent violation you experienced, or that sexual trauma. So do look for those empowering ones, and then also, and make notes of those in the margins, and then also go through and pick out the disempowering ones. And then finally, to wrap us up here, and that again is just because I think cats are adorable, so I put them in my slides. The cat in a wine glass has nothing to do with this slide. So here's a 5-step process that folks can walk themselves through. Pick a disempowering part of your sexual story and identify, what is that negative belief? What's the limiting story behind it? What have you told yourself about it? Does it mean that you're not good enough? Does it mean you're not lovable enough? Does it mean you're not worthy? Get beneath the surface of that. And what is the limiting belief that you're carrying around that? What is the shame or the embarrassment or whatever? And then sit with that discomfort. Use the triangle of awareness. Get clear on all of it. Be kind to yourself. Have compassion for yourself. Accept what's there, but know you're moving forward and can move through it. Write down then what you needed and wanted to hear in the past, or need or want to hear now. And I say this because it lives in you. If this is something from your past that didn't go well, it still lives in you. And so you can actually, by pulling up that memory, you can then be in the moment and writing on it and being like, yeah, you know what? When I came to my mom and told her, hey, yeah, Uncle Joe was, being inappropriate, something didn't feel right, and you didn't trust me, Mom. You can write down, I needed my mom to say, I totally trust you. I believe you. I've got your back. All of those things are ways that you get to start rewriting your stories from your past. So what did you need to hear then, or what do you need to hear now? I'm going over this briefly, but hopefully you're getting the gist of it. Write a new version about this part of yourself with details of your positive traits and what's possible now with this new story, with this new tweak on the story, with this new lens of interpretation, with this new empowerment, and really feel that. And I did this in a workshop recently, and boy, did people's energy change when they did this. Like, they felt like light, like you could see it, their faces relaxed and they had a lightness in them. And they really embodied what this was to create this shift of rewriting their stories. And then you can write down one action step to start living this new path. Because our best path to personal growth, you can do a seminar like this, you can read a book, but unless you put it into action with small, accountable baby steps, a little bit every day or a little bit every other day, that's how we actually really make sustainable change and rewire our brains. So figure out what your action step is to start living this new path. Maybe it's having a conversation with somebody in a new way. Maybe it's reading a new book. Maybe it's journaling every day on this topic for a few days. So whatever you'd want that to look like. And then you know what? If all else fails, today I will live in this moment. Unless the moment is unpleasant, in which case I will eat a cookie. Just a little humor to end this all. Because, we need to laugh. We need to laugh at ourselves kindly. And the situations that we're in, and know that this is hard. So that compassion and that humor, and not in a trivializing way, but in like a loving amusement way, and just being like, yeah, you know what, I need to give myself a break today. I'm full up on mindfulness. I'm gonna binge Netflix for the next 2 hours, and then tomorrow I will be back on my personal growth path. So that's that compassion, self-compassion, always balancing that door of pushing ourselves outside our comfort zone. So I want to thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, and so I will come back to you and see if there's any questions. Let's see. When you talk to college students about consent, are there discussions on the messiness of sexual communication and consent? I'm concerned that we are teaching young people that consent is always verbal, and that without a verbally stated yes, there is no consent for touch, including simple touch like reaching out to touch someone on the arm or hugging them, for example. Fantastic question. Yes, I get into what I call the gray area, because I think a lot of consent and sexual assault teaching and education on college campuses, which is fantastic. There's been fantastic work done, but I think it can be presented in too much of a black and white way. And, we're teaching, for example, if most sexual assaults happen to young women, but young women have been trained in our society to not feel strong in their voice, not feel like they can own their sexuality, and feel like they have to be nice and cater to the other, and that they're taught to not rock the boat. All of that is the good girl gender role socialization that we get growing up. And then just to say, okay, so you have to give an enthusiastic yes to a sexual encounter. Most young women do not have the skills or the comfort to do that, maybe unless they're drunk. And that makes consent so much messier and more confusing. So on the flip side of that, I do teach, like there's really great research that shows that particularly like college men think they can read sexual interest in others, but they tend to misread it. They read more than what is actually there. And I would also say our young men, like many of them have been raised with traditional masculinity, which means that they have been trained out of their emotions and out of their emotional intelligence and how to be present with their emotions, let alone how to attune to the emotions and the presence of another. So I teach a continuum from sexual, like sexual assault and coercion. I call it the coercion to consent continuum. And so at one end is, somebody's who's passed out and somebody's having sex with them. And at that end too is a forcible rape. At the other end of it is an enthusiastic hell yes from somebody. But most sexual encounters are in this large gray area in the middle, where you're not really giving a yes, you're going along, you're kind of interested, you're not sure, you're sort of awkward, you've been drinking some. And so I teach students how to negotiate those areas, how to find your voice more, how to also be able to just stay in the awkwardness, and fundamentally realize you are making assumptions no matter what, and that unless you get that hell yes, and that person is enthusiastically engaging in all of it, which very few sexual encounters are that way, you're making a lot of assumptions. So what can you do to slowly start building your comfort of being awkward? That triangle that I taught, that's part of what I teach college students. How do you sit with the discomfort of get comfortable with the discomfort of sexual social awkwardness, because that is so empowering, and that's where genuine confidence comes from. And then we could be, hey, I know this is awkward, but I don't want to do anything you don't want to do, so I'm just going to check in with you. Or, hey, like, I like you and I like what we're doing here, but I don't actually want to go any further, or I think I'm actually not going to like myself in the morning and I'm not going to like you. So I actually teach some skills in that awkwardness, because in a 2-hour and a 90-minute lecture that I have college students, I can't teach them how to have emotional intelligence and social intelligence skills to actually attune to reading someone else. But I do teach them mindfulness, and I do some compassion exercises with them where they get an experience of what it is to be in touch with themselves and how to actually start to feel that in others. So I hope that answered your question. Let me see. How long does it take to get out of madness and rumination cycles? I'm sure it's different for different people, but would you say it takes weeks of practice and years? I think everything. I think 3 months of concerted effort is often like the minimum amount of time it needs to start creating strong enough neural pathways outside of whatever our programmed ones are. And so I like to use the analogy of you're in like a thick jungle down in the Amazon, and our established patterns and neural pathways that are just efficient are like a 5-foot wide paved path through this jungle that you're like, there's no thoughts, you're just easily moving along. Trying to create new patterns around self-worth, intimacy, communication, gender roles, it's like taking a machete to that jungle, and it's exhausting and it's tiring. And as soon as you're tired, stressed, didn't sleep well, or are hangry, or got triggered into something that feels too big, you're back on that established path. So I think 3 months of everyday little activities connected to whatever madness you're trying to get out of, and the cycles you're getting out of, and that bushwhacking that you're doing, so to speak, it takes about that amount of time to start creating some new substantial pathways. But like mindfulness is like, it's like training for a marathon. You need to do a little bit every day and build it up, and you do want, days off and be kind to yourself and all, but it is like a muscle that you're training. And then, the question says, does it take weeks of practice or years? There's some things like, I know lots of women, and I sometimes fall in this category around body image topics in our society. They're just so insidious, and we're in ever aging bodies. They're always, fighting this battle more. And that, some of these topics are lifetime journeys of always just pulling back. They get easier. You get more skills. You're kinder to yourself. You're more emotionally resilient. That's what all these mindfulness practices teach us, all of those things. But it doesn't mean that those things go away. We just change our relationship to them, and we can respond instead of react, and in a much quicker pace. I know some things, say something negative happens in my life, something I'm so disappointed about. In the past, I would have carried that for a week or two and been so disappointed. Now, within hours, and like, I still feel the depth of it, but I do my exercises and boom. And then like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, that still sucks, but okay, I'll move on. And it's not compartmentalizing. It's fully being in it and processing. It's just the process goes much faster. Let's see. Any tips on how to suggest practicing mindfulness to a particularly skeptical friend? Yeah, somebody has to want to do it and try it. One thing, if they're skeptical, and you can point to some of the research, and there's some really great research studies out there of the impact of meditation on our brains and mindful meditation. That would be a place to start if statistics and research does work for that person. Another thing is just to lead by example. I know when I've been in some past relationships that I'm like, you need to do this. And then I was like, okay, yeah, that doesn't work so well. And if I step back and just lead by example, and then I'm like, hey, I'm going to sit down and meditate for 15 minutes. in about a half hour or something after dinner. Do you want to join me? Think about it. And so that type of leading by example, like, hey, I'm going to go to this workshop. It's just an hour. It sounds really interesting. Why don't you come to me and then we could grab dinner afterwards? That would be a way of just easily exposing them to the value so that they can take it in. Because if somebody's skeptical, then they're often protecting from something of maybe appearing foolish or believing in things that aren't true, or they're afraid that they can't really change themselves. So there's often some sort of block going on. So the kinder and the easier you facilitate the context, it might work for them. Okay, let's see. Okay, we got 2 more questions in 2 more minutes. How have you benefited from mindfulness in your life? What are some key takeaways when you compare pre-mindfulness Dr. Jenn to post-mindfulness Dr. Jenn? Oh my gosh, it's insane, the difference. I have old journals from when I was in college and grad school, and I'm 46 now, so that was a while ago. I was like so many of the young women in their early to mid-20s that I see as clients, that they're just filled with angst and dating and trying to find their voice, and just those like cyclings and where you want to do like drive-bys of the guy's house, which we don't have to do now because we have social media and we could just stalk them on there. I was like all of those young things, and I was the good girl, and you followed the rules, and I had been raised Catholic, and so this shit works. I'm 15 years into practicing mindfulness. I can give you, I was reflecting on this week. So my first book was just published this Tuesday, and there was so much stress leading up to it, and media stuff and stuff with my publisher. And I did my launch event because I wanted it at a bar and restaurant, and I got it sponsored, and it was beautiful. And there were so many moving parts, and my sister came into town, and my parents came into town, and a friend flew in from Boston and surprised me. And I'm trying to keep up with all the media stuff, and I'm plugging Amazon, and it was just, and then I'm starting a book tour, a mini book tour in California right now. And it was, I'm exhausted, and there were so many pieces of feeling overwhelmed. I can't tell you how many people gave me the feedback, and people that know me most. And they're like, you are so calm, Jenn. You are so gracious. Like, you are doing all of these things and you're on top of it and you're still grounded. And that is, that's a testament to mindfulness. That's a testament to practicing what I preach. And this shit's, it's not easy. So there's drastic differences for me from my 20s to me in my 40s. And not that there's, I still have my weaknesses, and I still have my shit that I'm working on, and I still get triggered and all sorts of stuff, but it's a profound change. And yeah, if I had to break it down to 2 words, it's probably confidence and happiness. That those feel really, like legit for me. Thank you for that question. Let's see, last one. What are things men can do as boyfriends or friends and family to help women along this journey? Oh gosh. Reflecting on your own stuff that you were raised with. So knowing, because it's hard to help someone else when our agenda and our own stuff is getting in the way, and the lens of interpretation that we have, or we're getting triggered. So the more that you're journaling and reflecting and meditating on the messages you learned growing up, any traumas you had, your masculinity training, or whatever was imposed on you. And then knowing that, like, listening, being kind, and just creating that space and not having to fix anything, and just being that kind ear and validating what she's struggling with. That is, so many men don't realize the value of that. I hear that in my practice a lot. That is so valuable, just to give us that safe space to be heard and understood, and loved. That is so nurturing for so many of us, men and women and everybody, and gender non-binary folks, all of us. But particularly men to women, that's something that can be incredibly powerful. And I will say, and as we're wrapping up here, to toot my own horn a little bit, my first book that was just published, while this is targeted towards women, I've had multiple male friends that now have gotten, and they had pre-order copies, so they've already read it, and they were like, whoa, I really understand women a whole lot more now, and what they've grown up with, and what messages they carry, and how they carry their shame. So this book can give a lot of insights into that. And every chapter ends with worksheets to write in. And then the middle substantive chapters are about how do we apply this, which is, I have over, where is that here? I have over like 40, I think, exercises in this book. I don't know where that page is. I was going to show it to you. I have them at the end that break down. And almost all of these exercises would be for, this is the page that links back to all the page numbers in the book of where all those exercises are. Almost all of those exercises, anybody can do them. They're not just for women, even though I've targeted it that way for the book specifically. So all of that, there's lots of skill building in there, to toot my own horn a bit. Anyway, yeah. So I think we're done here. Thank you all so much for your encouraging energy and empowering words. Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul, for that. So I will sign off now. It was nice chatting with you. Go forth, live passionately, live mindfully, and be kind to yourself in the process. All right. Take care, folks.